Wow. Wow, that was quite a presentation, Doris. I think when I'm through with this message, you'll see that how they both have the same theme, family division, family hatred, family horribly treating one another, throwing one another out. But in the end, everyone wins and there's reunification. So um, I hope that comes through loud and clear in the message. Um, it's supposed to anyway. Let's see. I'm assuming that I can do this. Oh, let's see. Well, it seems like we have to go through a lot of stuff just to get here. I've
Hmm.
entitled this message, The God Who Sees and Hears You. It's going to be a story that's going to be centered around a Egyptian slave girl by the name of Hagar. And I think you'll find the story to be a fascinating one. You may already know it, but I hope we bring out some details and cause us to think about some things we may never have thought about before. But by way of introduction, I think it's helpful for us to understand that the Old Testament, which is where I'm getting most of my message today from, is primarily about the ancestry of the Jewish people. The New Testament begins in a Jewish context, but moves into including Gentiles, which is probably most of us, all non-Jewish people. When we read these stories in the Old Testament, we may think this only happens to important people, and God basically ignores the rest of us. That we can be tempted to think that. But I want to urge all of us to read these stories as if we were the ones written about. Every one of us is on a journey with the Lord, and we too will have a worthwhile story to tell. I think Hagar and Abraham, Isaac and Jacob will be as fascinated with each of your stories as we are with theirs. Let me introduce this Egyptian slave girl. The story begins calling her a maidservant, but later on you'll see that Sarah refers to her as a slave girl. In Genesis 16 and verse 1, it says, Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, Now, we don't know exactly how they acquired this maidservant, um, whether she had been sold by her parents, whether she had been captured in some sort of a raid. Suffice it to say, I suspect it was not voluntary on her part. But in that day and age, they didn't have electricity, didn't have the modern conveniences, so anybody of any importance at all just had to have a maid and servants in order to function. And Abraham was quite a wealthy man. So he had this Egyptian maidservant. So Sarah had been promised to have a child, to have a son with Abram. God had promised that, but it had gone a long time and no child was born. Sarah was barren. So she came up with this idea. She said, The Lord has kept me from having children. Now she's telling her husband, Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her. And of course, we would be somewhat shocked at that today, I suppose. But it's a different time, a different era. And we have the benefit of a few thousand years of experience in building a society that they didn't have. So that's what was done back then. And Abraham agreed. No, sounds like a good idea to me. And the question I have was Hagar even asked if this was okay with her? Or was she being treated basically like, I don't know, like some sort of an animal? Just breed this animal. Is that kind of how she was being treated? Or was she, you know, in agreement? I kind of feel like it was imposed on her. Serious trouble soon erupts. It says, so after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. So right away, the trouble starts. For a woman to be barren in that day and age was that in that day and age, but especially in that culture, was just an absolutely terrible, terrible thing, and a very your reputation and your honor was seriously suffering. So somehow she was able to get away with just her despising her mistress. Um, some bad blood there. Sarah said to Abram, verse 5, "You are responsible for the wrong I'm suffering." Now she's blaming him for that. It was her idea to begin with. He agreed to it, but now she's casting the blame on him. Um, I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she's pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Dragging God in there, and what she's wanting is she's wanting God to condemn somebody here. Please condemn somebody. And unfortunately, we find that still alive and well in our modern cultures. We want God to condemn somebody. As long as it's not me, condemn somebody, especially condemn the people I don't like. So she's wanting God to say, "You're right, Sarah, and Abraham's wrong." That's what she's wanting. But life is made miserable in that household, and so Abram simply responds, "Servant's in your hands. She's your servant. Do with her whatever you think best." So Abram doesn't exactly stand up for her, doesn't stand up for Hagar. It's just, okay, just whatever you think. Then Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. So Sarai made Hagar's life a living hell. That's all I can describe it. Her only options were to stay and suffer. Those are her options, or leave. And so she chose to leave. And she now is out in the desert. And things must have been really bad there in that household for her to just flee. And I'm sure, again, many of us have had experiences where we flee from home because life has gotten so miserable, so awful, so dangerous at home that we find the only option we have is to leave. Maybe you've had a job like that and a boss like that, but I'm sure we're all very familiar with how it gets so bad that your only choice is you just got to leave. Jump out of the frying pan into the fire, so to speak. So the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" Now that must have been quite a surprise to her that here's this person, and I have a note on the bottom, angel of the Lord, usually, or often anyway, refers to a pre-incarnational appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament. So here we have him speaking to her. And that must have been, what did he think of her? What did she think of him? Did she think of him as just an ordinary human being? Perhaps. "I'm running away from my mistress Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." Now, if you're asking God for help, if you're asking God for advice, and he suddenly tells you, "Hey, just go back to your mistress and submit to her," it's like, can this really be the voice of God? That's not exactly what she wanted to hear. She didn't want to hear to go back and submit to her. And it makes you wonder, why did the Lord tell her to do that? Because he would have known that she was in for even more of a hellish time there. Because she had just, several months to go before she would give birth. Go back to your mistress and submit to her. God doesn't always answer us the way we hope he answers us. So then the angel added to this, "I will so increase your descendants so that they will be too numerous to count." So by this time, she's probably wondering, who can promise that? Maybe she's starting to think this is more than just a man. And of course, by living in Abram's household, she would have already heard the stories of Abram being told by God to leave his country. She would have heard that, so it wouldn't have been totally unfamiliar. Verse 11, the angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now with child and you will have a son. I was like, okay, how did he know that? That would have to be God himself, right? You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. Ishmael means God hears. Now, this is a rare thing indeed, because here we have God telling her what she should name her son. That doesn't happen very often in the Bible. You remember when Mary was found with child of by the Holy Spirit, she was told she was supposed to name her son Jesus. And John the Baptist's father was told that he was supposed to name his son John. So again, it doesn't happen all that often, but here it happened. So he's intimately involved, and by giving her son the name Ishmael, it forever stamps in her mind that God hears. God is hearing you. God is paying attention to you. We seem to be a little bit too not as, how can I say it? We're not quite as uh, well, I don't exactly know how to describe it. We tend to name our children here in the United States anyway, probably a lot of them after some popular stars on television or the movies, uh, and not necessarily like they did in ancient times where names had some really significant meanings to them, deep meanings. Then in verse 12, the angel of the Lord says this about Ishmael, he will be a wild donkey of a man. Another translation says he will be a wild ass of a man. And when you read that, especially if we're in America, that sounds like an insult. Like, he's what? You're supposed to, that the kind of boy you're going to have? He's going to be a wild donkey? His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility towards his brothers. Well, again, this is a problem we run into because we were not part of that culture. Now, here in America, if the angel of the Lord would have said, "He will be like a bald eagle of a man," well, when you think of a bald eagle here in the United States, that's a symbol of freedom. You would think, "Oh, he's going to be free," right? Well, apparently that's what that wild donkey symbolized back in their culture, and it's mentioned also in the book of Job how the wild donkey is free. Nobody is oppressing the wild donkey. He can go wherever he wants to, whenever he wants to. So in a way, that name would be something that she would have looked forward to because she's a slave girl, remember? And now she's being told that her son is not going to be a slave. He's going to be free and wild. And this is also his strength. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. So he's a guy who doesn't put up with stuff, right? So I think in a way, she would look at that and say, wow, he's not going to be a slave like me. Now, Genesis 16 and verse 3, she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. So she recognized now that the angel of the Lord that she spoke to was actually God. You are the God who sees me. You see me. I'm not invisible. People who are servants or slaves or are abused oftentimes will say, I'm invisible. Nobody pays attention to me. And I walk into the room and nobody notices. I walk out of the room and nobody notices. I sit in the classroom and nobody notices me. I'm the invisible person. And here she says, you are the God who sees me. So if you think you're an invisible, uh, well, this is meant for you. You are the God, a God who sees you. And then she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. Not only, not only had she experienced hearing him, but she has actually seen him. That's why the well was called Bir Lahai Roy. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son he had born. Now let's think about this. If she had remained out in the desert and never gone home, Abram never would have had any influence on this boy, Ishmael. And as we'll see later on in the story, Sarah actually had a son born about 14 years later. So Abram had this as his only son for 14 years, and you can make a lot of an impression on your son your first 14 years of his life. So even though there was contention and division in the household, Abram still had a son to, you know, do this stuff with, hunting, fishing, whatever. Uh, learn how to do things that men do. So Abram was 86 years old when this happened, but now Abram lived, I don't know, it was 170 years or something. So he had quite a bit of life yet to go. Genesis 21 and verse 6, we'll jump ahead a few chapters here. And now here, Sarah, she's been renamed. And that H, by the way, I think there's a letter in the Hebrew alphabet that has determined something like speaks about God. So by changing her name and putting that H on the end of it, it has a more of a connection with God. So God has brought me laughter. So that's why she named him Isaac. God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And what was she talking about? Well, she was past the age of childbearing, and now she has the son that she was always promised. And so just telling that story, it's you can just see people sitting around and talking about that. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? And yet I have borne him a son in his old age. And by the way, you also notice that H stuck in Abram's name now. Again, to change it to Abraham, that's some of the significance that comes along with the Hebrew alphabet. And we lose that in our American culture. We don't quite get it. Anyway, in verse 8, the child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had born to Abraham was mocking. So you see, he's kind of like his mother, kind of like, how Hagar had despised Sarah. So there was that animosity, and that animosity had got passed on. And so now Ishmael was kind of stirring the pot here, kind of fanning the flames, in mocking this little boy, Isaac. So Sarah sees that in verse 10. She said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman." Calls her a slave woman, not a not a maidservant, but a slave woman, and her son. Get rid of him, for that slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. That's how deep the divide was. It's like it was a civil war, for crying out loud, going on inside that household, a civil war. And it was interesting that some of the music that Doris played today dealt with songs that were quite well known during the Civil War of the United States. So she was quite adamant about that. And again, Abraham, he was really distressed. I mean, he had 14 years of being with Ishmael, and he didn't want to lose his son. And it really, really concerned him and distressed him. But God, speaking to Abraham, said, "Don't be so distressed. You can be distressed, but don't go over the top of it here. About the boy and your maidservant." Now, again, the Lord refers to her as maidservant. He doesn't call her slave woman. So again, it's interesting how gracious and kind the Lord is right in the middle of this horrible infighting in the family. Because we all, when there's a family squabble, the first thing we try to do is we try to get other members of the family on our side. And don't we often do that in our prayers as well? We want God on our side against the other guy. And he's not going to take sides here. He says, just listen to Sarah, listen to whatever she tells you, because it's through Isaac your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the maidservant into a nation also. It's like, don't worry, Abraham. I mean, she says not going to share in the inheritance, but I'm going to make him into a nation. He's your offspring. I promised you that. It's going to happen. I'm faithful to you. Don't worry about it. This is going to work out, Abraham. Even though it doesn't look like it, it's going to work out. Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. Interesting, Abraham's doing that. Sarah, she's like, I don't want nothing to do with this. A lot of animosity there. He set them on her shoulders, so it takes the skin of water and the food and puts them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered into the desert of Beersheba. So now she's in the desert again. And the water's not going to last long. And when we are in serious trouble, we just fall apart and we think we're going to die. There's our hope is lost. The circumstances are impossible. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. So they must have been really, really beat by then. I'm sure it was hot. Get a little bit of shade. She puts him under one of the bushes, lay here and rest. And then she went off and sat down nearby, about a bow shot away. So, I don't know how far they could shoot a bow and arrow in those days, probably at least 100 yards. For she thought, I can't watch the boy die. She's given up hope. And it's interesting that she doesn't really remember 14 years earlier where the Lord spoke to her. And we need that reminder often, don't we? Where we maybe have had God pull our feet out of the fire, and then a few years later we forget all about it. Like, well, maybe God's wandered off somewhere. I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there nearby, she began to sob. Her heart was breaking. She couldn't see, and oftentimes when we are so um, in such pain, we can't see the possibilities that might even be in front of us. Genesis 21 and verse 17. Now, God heard the boy crying. So not only is she crying, but Ishmael is crying as well. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven. So now she hears a voice, uh, apparently doesn't see him at that point, but God calls to her from heaven. What's the matter, Hagar? Now he knows, obviously he knows, but she needs to tell. And we need to tell God our fears. What's the matter? What's going on? Tell God our fears. Because if we don't tell him our fears, he doesn't really like to pry into that. It's like he wants us to be free and give him permission. Do not be afraid. That's the most often repeated command in the New Testament, certainly, and probably even in the entire Bible. Do not be afraid. And that's to all of us. No matter how lousy the circumstances may be, don't be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. God's not deaf. He's heard all of our misery and our suffering. He's heard it all. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. Now, you see, the well was there, but she didn't see it. She was so inward focused with her pain that she couldn't see. So anyway, she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy. Verse 20, was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. Now, while he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife for him from Egypt. Now, they're both free at last. Notice, his mother no longer has the status of a slave. She actually goes out and finds a wife for his son, finds a wife for her son. Now, this is an amazing transformation here. Ishmael is considered to be the ancestor of many modern day Arabs. And if you read ahead into Genesis 25, you'll find that Ishmael and Isaac eventually do get together. But it's not until Abraham dies and they together bury their father. And I think there's some prophetic thing about that too, because the three great monotheistic religions are Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And somehow or another, we all get together somehow, some way. Of course, it's through Jesus, but how we get there, it's going to be interesting. It's easy to think of the heroes of the Bible as being somehow superhuman with strengths that the rest of us don't have. It's easy to think that, but not so. Please pay attention to how they made many of the messes they were in, just like we do. These heroes, Abraham, Isaac, uh, Hagar, Sarai, they were flawed people just like us. Yes, they did wonderful things, but they also had flaws just like us. The real hero of the Bible is Jesus. That's the real hero. These heroes of the Bible succeeded because the Lord saw, heard, and blessed them continually. We're not self-made. We're made by God. You and I will succeed because the Lord always sees, always hears, and blesses us. Here's some things to consider. Hagar was considered a nobody. just a slave girl from a different nation. But God always hears and sees us. And in the end, Hagar had her freedom, and she had a son who would be free, and also became the mother of several nations. God is not afraid to be in the middle of our messes. In fact, he's smack dab in the middle of every one of our messes right now. And he's kind of waiting for us to ask him, give permission to, dig down to the bottom of our fears and help us through that. He's not a condemning God. He's a redeeming God and a restoring God. And it's in the middle of our horrible messes where redemption and restoration take place. It is a thrilling experience to learn to listen, to sense his presence, and to live the life we were created to live. And I hope and I pray that this message touches our hearts deep down inside so that we're not afraid to ask God, please talk to me. Please help me. And it's in his name we ask this. Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen.